Right, so how far gone is the Israel lobby now if a group of slavishly loyal politicians like Labour Friends of Israel are now seen as being so insufficiently loyal to the Israeli regime that some Zionist extremists are now demanding the group actually be banned from visiting Israel? British politicians, Britain, the nation that through its racist and colonialist mindset at the time literally led to the creation of Israel itself, now face being banned apparently because they are no longer seen as sufficiently bootlicking in the face of genocide and not least the banning of 2 Labour MPs from entering that country. Well, this is what has tipped the scales, it seems. For all of their overarching support and subservience, LFI MPs sickeningly show a single tweet in support of 2 Labour MPs turned around and sent home from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv is all it took to bring even more fanatical and extreme voices to the fore, demanding Israel deal with LFI and ban them all from ever visiting Israel. As you can imagine, people have had a field day with this hilarious and deserved dose of karma inflicted upon heavily Israel-lobbied MPs. But will it be enough for them to do what is right and just and abolish LFI and take a stand? Will they bow and scrape even lower instead? Right, so Labour Friends of Israel, or LFI, have had a serving of karma heaped upon them, great big ladlefuls of the stuff, because they dared put a baby toe out of line to the genocidal Zionist state of Israel, and condemnation from the even more extreme end of Zionist support was dropped on them for that, something they absolutely deserve, something that has triggered much mirth amongst people who have picked up on the exchange in question already. The irony really is almost poetic, though. After years of uncritically defending Israel's most brutal policies and actions, going back well before the events of October 7th, where Israel was still a brutal occupying regime over the Palestinian territories, now, suddenly, off the back of a single tweet, LFI has found itself on the receiving end of Zionist fury for daring to mildly protest Israel's decision to bar 2 of its own MPs, Abtazam Mohammed and Wan Yang, from entering the country. So what did LFI say that was so awful then, Damo? Well, they wrote on their official Twitter account that it's wrong and counterproductive for Israel to refuse entry to British members of Parliament. Over the years, we've taken hundreds of MPs to Israel and Palestine. It's vital parliamentarians are able to visit and understand the situation on the ground. This is a principle we'd hope all political parties would support. We have raised our concerns with the Israeli authorities. And that's it. It's barely critical. It's a bit of hand-wringing. Well, this is unfortunate kind of positioning. But even this was too much for some, as a reply came swiftly. We have raised our concerns about you to the Israeli authorities. Have you spoken in your concerns to people like May Golan, Amichai Chikli and Almog Cohen, young superstar leaders of the Israeli government who represent the will of the people? Really? Would that be the same May Golan who has professed to being a proud racist and who declared she was personally proud of the ruins of Gaza? Would that be the same Amichai Chikli who invited Jordan Bardella of Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, formerly the National Front Party of France, to Israel? Meaning a guy representing a party that was formed by a former Nazi officer and Holocaust denier is more welcome than a couple of Labour MPs. And as for Almog Cohen, it's enough that he belongs to Itamar Ben-Gvir's far-right Otzma Yehudit party to know this is not somebody to celebrate. He is very much the far right. Those are the chosen idols of the replier to that LFI tweet, eh? Well, when you consider that reply came from the official account of Betar USA, anyone who has heard of them might not be that surprised any longer. They make LFI look like a group of Hamas cheerleaders by comparison. Nailed on by the fact this tweet alone is apparently enough to elicit Betar to report LFI to Israeli authorities. Labour Friends of Israel is an organisation that has spent decades lobbying for Israel within Labour. So for it to criticise Israel at all, in any way, shape or form, even mildly here, is unusual. But then Labour MPs don't usually get refused entry to the country. They tend to get sent there for mandatory indoctrination instead. So their critique here, this Twitter response, was tepid at best. More like an expression of regret over Israel's decision, but stopping well short of any real condemnation. Yet even this mild rebuke was enough to trigger the fury of Betar USA, who are a far right Zionist group, notorious for their violent rhetoric, their campaigns against pro-Palestinian activists, notably against university campus students in recent weeks. It is a truly bonkers situation to be in because LFI is a group that has literally bent over backwards for Israel. And here we have a group that has turned a blind eye, by and large, to the Israeli atrocities being committed in the Middle East. Having attacked the International Criminal Court over the issuing of arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, and promoted Israel and Israeli interests incessantly in the UK, despite decades of illegal occupation by Israel on the Palestine territories, and at its heart glorifies the UK's historical role in facilitating the spread of Zionism. Some even regard Zionism as a beautiful thing, rather than the racist, white supremacist and colonialist monstrosity that it actually is. And yet even this is not enough for the absolute fanatics of Betar, who view any deviation from total, unthinking and unflinching loyalty to Israel as absolute treason. Betar USA is not just another pro-Israel advocacy group. It is a far-right fascist organisation that has been actively campaigning for the deportation of pro-Palestinian students in the US, even to the point of drawing up lists of names to hand to the authorities. They were formed by the militant Zionist leader Zev Jabotinsky a little over 100 years ago. So Betar actually predates Israel itself by a good 25 years. Betar has been linked to violent harassment of activists, doxing campaigns, vandalism, vigilantism, and lobbying for draconian measures against anyone who dares criticise Israel. During the recent wave of student protests across American universities, Betar was at the forefront of efforts to have pro-Palestinian demonstrators expelled, stripped of visas, and even criminally charged for daring to exercise their right to free speech and freedom of expression. Their rhetoric is explicitly ethno-nationalist, with leaders openly advocating for the complete expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank. They are the personification of Zionism in its most starkly blunt and violent form. So in this context, Betar's attacks on LFI are not just mildly amusing, along with the comments coming from others ranging from cheering on their view that LFI are Hamas, just to wind things up further, and thanking Betar for advocating for the banning of LFI going on any more Israeli junkets. It's all very much done in a tongue-in-cheek way. But it is a stark reminder of how extreme the pro-Israel lobby has become. If even LFI is now being denounced as insufficiently loyal to Israel, what does that say about the direction of Zionist politics and Zionist influence within politics? The fact that LFI continues to operate within Labour without censure, that it even still exists, whilst Israel carries out a genocide, is a damning indictment of that party's moral bankruptcy. But then when the party leader and Prime Minister is a Zionist without qualification, his words, we shouldn't be too surprised, really. Just last month, LFI's new chair, John Pearce, published a nauseating article celebrating Britain's historical support for Zionism, framing it as a noble legacy rather than a bloody colonial project. Amongst the things Pearce bragged about were Britain's surveillance flights over Gaza in support of Israel's genocide, blocking progress for Palestinians at the UN Human Rights Council, dropping the commitment under Jeremy Corbyn's Labour leadership to immediately recognise a Palestinian state, and declaring that the hostages in Gaza were their first priority, presumably above the lives of the nigh on 18,000 children Israel has killed in Gaza, or the respecting of international law, or the ending of Israel's illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories, or freeing the thousands of Palestinian hostages held in Israel, often without charge. Pearce also boasted of LFI's desire to prioritise a free trade agreement with Israel and the mobilisation of British police to limit, even more than they already are, the movement of anti-genocide protests here in the UK. Yet this LFI is not enough for Betar, apparently. So what are the two MPs who were banned from entering Israel then? There's been a fair bit of news coverage of this, but not necessarily why these two particularly. Abdesam Mohammed is the MP for Sheffield Central, and Wan Yang, MP for Early and Woodley. They've both been outspoken critics of Israeli atrocities in Gaza. Surely that isn't enough to warrant being banned from entering Israel, though. Well, you'd be surprised, actually, but there is more to it. Neither of these women are actually British-born, and that's relevant here. Mohammed is the first Yemeni-born British MP, and we all know the issues Israel have with Yemen these days, don't we? So did that play a part in this? Yang is the first Chinese-born British MP. China, not exactly fans of Israel either, but Yang also happens to be a Quaker. And along with the fallout from the Youth Demand meeting at a Quaker meeting house in Westminster recently, did her religious convictions play a role here? Mohammed also happens to be the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. She holds David Lammy's feet to the fire, so to speak, on foreign policy. The ongoing arms sales to Israel and other military aid have come in for particular scrutiny from her. Perhaps unsurprising when she made Israel and Gaza a linchpin of her own election campaign, having demanded the hostages from both sides be released, not siding with Israel per se at all. It is, however, on the FCDO website that Israel reserves the right to deny entry to anyone who has been considered to be publicly critical of Israel and can be legally barred from entry for backing boycotts of Israeli products or settlements or belonging to an organisation that does so. Still, you don't expect government MPs to be barred when the UK is so sycophantic, do you? Of course, one person who will happily try and gain some political capital out of all of this mess by apparently telling Israel she'll lick their boots with even more slobber than Keir Starmer's lot do has been Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, who suggested that it was right that Mohammed and Yang had been banned from entering Israel and that she was concerned about misinformation and conspiracy theories relating to Israel coming from Labour MPs and the 6 independent MPs, because she can't resist having a pop at Jeremy Corbyn and his independent alliance either. They aren't mistruths, they aren't conspiracy theories. Israel are a genocidal monster of Western making, and the monster is now out of control, having seemingly now turned on those that created it. All Badenoch has succeeded in doing is showing that even now, with all the depravity Israel has caused, she would back them over British interests in a heartbeat if given the chance. It isn't just over-promoted, talentless jokes like Kemi Badenoch rushing to defend Israel as they attack the UK, though. Media outlets like the Jewish Chronicle and the Telegraph have rushed to defend Israel's decision, with the JC absurdly comparing it to Britain's own powers to bar foreign politicians, such as happened in the case of Likud member of the Knesset Moshe Feiglin in 2008. Though Feiglin was blocked for promoting acts of terrorism. They also ridiculously used the example of far-right Dutch politician Geert Wilders being barred from coming to the UK, which was overturned on appeal. His Islamophobia, the concern cited at the time, but the law didn't feel the need to uphold that, it seems. This false equivalence ignores the fact that Israel routinely bans critics on political grounds, not just security ones, as the UK did in those aforementioned cases. The paper is fanatical and utterly ridiculous. But the fact that LFI is now being attacked by the very forces it has long enabled is a delicious irony, though. But it should also be a wake-up call to the Labour government that bending over for Israel is going to blow up in their faces each and every time. Labour must sever ties with all pro-Israel lobby groups and take a firm stand against Israel's apartheid and the genocide they are meting out, but there is fat chance of that ever happening when so many Labour MPs are in LFI and Starmer himself is such an avowed Zionist. The days of grovelling to a state that openly disrespects British democracy is going to continue to damage Labour and Tories like Badenoch trying to outdo Labour in the sycophancy stakes. They're only going to bring that on themselves as well. People will walk away in disgust, take their votes elsewhere. Meanwhile, speaking of One Yang and the Quakers, if you're not all caught up on the events leading to a police raid on a Quaker meeting house, a place of worship for them, in order to head off just the planning of a protest, not even an actual protest happening, again calling out Israel for its atrocities, as well as demanding action on climate change as well. Get all the details of the fallout for Labour there in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.